Picture a sprawling driveway lined with century-old oak trees, their branches forming a grand, shadowy canopy. At the end of this quiet approach stands the majestic Beauclair mansion, its marble columns gleaming under the moonlight. In the hush of midnight, a sleek black limousine pulls up to the front steps, delivering the triumphant millionaire Donovan Pierce. He's not alone. Clinging to his arm is Serena Quinn, a dazzling model with secrets of her own. Donovan steps out, brimming with confidence, prepared to flaunt his latest conquest. Little does he know, behind those massive double doors, his pregnant wife already waits, with a pair of earth-shattering surprises. Donovan Pierce was born in Santa Barbara, California, in the early 1980s. He was the youngest son of a middle-class family whose only luxury was a subscription to National Geographic. His parents, Randall and Josephine Pierce, both taught at the local community college. Though they were hardly wealthy, they instilled in Donovan the idea that knowledge could open doors that money alone could never pry open. Donovan, a sharp-eyed, wiry kid with a stubborn streak, found solace in reading about faraway lands. He dreamed of traveling to Africa, exploring the Amazon, and someday having enough money to live in a grand estate of his own. In high school, Donovan's natural charm made him popular among peers. Though not an exceptional athlete, he excelled in debate and showed a fierce determination to win any argument. Teachers praised him for his intelligence and tenacity, but behind the confident demeanor lay an unsatisfied hunger. He wanted more, always more. This insatiable thirst for success would become his defining trait, one that propelled him through life at breakneck speed. By the time he graduated, Donovan had his sights set on Stanford University. Through scholarships and financial aid, he secured enrollment in the prestigious institution. There, he fell in love with economics and business. By senior year, he was running an investment club with 40 members. They pooled their modest funds and tested the volatile waters of the stock market. Donovan didn't just want to break even, he wanted to crush the market. Armed with cunning strategies and long nights studying charts, he managed to bring their returns to remarkable heights. Word spread about his uncanny ability to see market trends before they became mainstream. Upon graduation, Donovan accepted a position at a well-known financial firm in New York. Only 22, he was already sitting in conference rooms with high-profile clients, including the likes of Warren Buffett's associates and other billionaires scouting fresh talent. Donovan took every opportunity he could to glean wisdom from these industry titans. His nights were spent with spreadsheets, analyzing stock movements, and his days were consumed by endless networking. Over the next decade, Donovan rose to prominence. He founded his own investment firm, Pierce Capital Management, and took his net worth from a humble few $1,000s to tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. Eventually, his name appeared on the covers of financial magazines. He became a recognized figure, invited to speak at conferences worldwide. Yet Donovan's ambition was boundless. He set his eyes on surpassing every record in the book and building a personal life that reflected his success. It was during this lofty ascent that he met Elizabeth Radcliffe, a descendant of old money. Elizabeth was a well-educated philanthropist, known for championing causes related to women's health. She was radiant in a quiet way, elegant, thoughtful, and with a moral compass that ran deeper than Donovan's relentless drive. Her mother, Caroline Radcliffe, was once part of a philanthropic circle involving the late Princess Diana, donating to charitable organizations across Europe. The Radcliffe heritage included a storied estate in the Hamptons and connections to aristocrats in England. Donovan was attracted to Elizabeth's poise and the air of dignity she carried wherever she went. Their relationship started gently long walks by the shoreline in East Hampton, quiet dinners at exclusive clubs, intellectual discussions about the future of finance and philanthropy. Before long, Donovan realized that Elizabeth wasn't just another accessory to be paraded around. She was a pillar of wisdom and stability, someone who kept him tethered to his humanity when greed tugged him off-center. The world watched in fascination when Donovan and Elizabeth wed in a grand ceremony at the Radcliffe family's estate. Media outlets splashed their pictures across the front pages, calling it the merger of new money and old world grace. In an unexpected twist of sincerity, Donovan's vows to Elizabeth were heartfelt. He promised to love, protect, and treasure her, never letting wealth overshadow his devotion to her and any future family they might have. But the shadows of desire and ambition sometimes morph into darker forms. Even as Donovan soared to greater financial heights, he found himself haunted by a restless energy. He wanted excitement, passion, anything to satiate an appetite for novelty that neither Elizabeth's serene presence nor his legitimate business triumphs could fully feed. And so the seeds of betrayal were sown. Elizabeth's life had revolved around philanthropic ventures long before she met Donovan. But her marriage brought new challenges. She struggled to find a balance between supporting Donovan's insatiable ambitions and preserving her own identity. With each passing year, Donovan's name grew in the financial sector, which meant more publicity, more parties, more demands. Elizabeth attended numerous galas as the gracious hostess. She wore dazzling gowns, smiled for photos, and patiently listened to endless conversations about stocks and corporate expansions. In private, Elizabeth was not as meek as the media painted her to be. She had her convictions. She often confronted Donovan about certain investments that seemed questionable, environmentally damaging ventures, profits extracted from borderline unethical deals. Donovan would smile and reassure her that everything was within legal bounds. "This is how we fund your charities," he teased. "We do well, and then we do good." Most of the time, Elizabeth would sigh, letting the conversation fade. She recognized that Donovan's approach to business was a far cry from her father's genteel style. Still, she believed in her husband's underlying decency. Years into the marriage, Elizabeth yearned for a child. At first, Donovan brushed off the topic. "Let's solidify the business," he would say. "Let me cross a few major milestones, and then we'll talk about starting a family." Deep down, Elizabeth suspected Donovan was afraid to be pinned down by the responsibilities of fatherhood. He thrived on risk spontaneity and the freedom to jet off to Europe or Asia at a moment's notice if a deal demanded it. However, the unstoppable march of time and a near-death experience, Elizabeth's father had a sudden stroke, galvanized them. Realizing how fragile life could be, Donovan agreed they should try for a child. In the following months, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant, and the new reality thrilled her. She glowed with expectancy, her philanthropic work pivoting to focus on maternal health and child welfare. Donovan seemed happy about the news at first, but his reaction lacked the effusive zeal Elizabeth had hoped for. She told herself it was simply Donovan's nature to remain collected, even about momentous life changes. During the pregnancy, Elizabeth took refuge in the quiet comforts of Beauclair Mansion, an estate the couple had purchased in the countryside of upstate New York. Surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills, it provided the perfect retreat from the swirling chaos of Manhattan life. There, away from public scrutiny, Elizabeth could focus on preparing for motherhood. Donovan often visited on weekends, always claiming he was too busy with urgent business deals during the week. As months rolled on, Elizabeth began to suspect that Donovan's late nights and business trips might not all be about closing deals. Even so, Elizabeth tried to cast aside her doubts. She had twins on the way, 2 lives growing within her 2 blessings that she believed would knit her and Donovan closer together. She wrote in her diary each day, documenting every emotional shift, every flutter in her belly, and every dream she had of a future filled with children's laughter, echoing through the mansion's halls. In these private moments, Elizabeth recounted her grandmother's stories of how love in a marriage was tested in unthinkable ways, but devotion and faith often carried couples through the darkest storms. She had no idea that her test would come so soon, or in such a heart-wrenching manner. Serena Quinn was the kind of woman people instinctively watched as soon as she walked into a room. With almond-shaped hazel eyes and wavy auburn hair cascading to her waist, she emanated a fiery energy that demanded attention. She had been raised in a modest household in San Diego, her father a retired Marine, her mother a struggling painter. Despite their limited means, Serena's parents poured their hearts into supporting her talents, whether it was ballet painting or modeling. By 18, Serena signed with an upscale modeling agency and discovered a taste for the finer things in life. The swirling lights of fashion, shows designer gowns, and the glittering stares of cameras dazzled her. She lived for backstage parties and exclusive VIP events where she rubbed shoulders with celebrities and moguls. Over time, she learned how to charm men of power. That charm wasn't always innocent. For Serena, it became a method of survival and advancement in a cutthroat world. If she played her cards right, she could secure financial stability that might otherwise elude her. Her path crossed with Donovan Pierce on a private yacht off the coast of Monaco. Donovan was there for a high-profile tech conference, and Serena had been hired to model for a European luxury brand. The second Donovan saw her laughing on the deck, wearing an opulent emerald gown that clung to her figure, he felt an old, forbidden spark ignite. He introduced himself with characteristic smoothness, Donovan Pierce, of Pierce Capital Management. Might I ask whose stunning presence I'm fortunate enough to share this deck with? Serena knew the name anyone in high society did. She smiled coyly. Serena Quinn. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Pierce. Over champagne flutes, they exchanged banter about the future of cryptocurrencies and the enthralling but superficial nature of fashion. She was witty. He was enthralled. One conversation led to another, and soon the shimmering lights of Monaco's coastline faded into the hush of the night. Donovan found himself lost in Serena's raw magnetism, a stark contrast to Elizabeth's graceful composure. Despite knowing full well that he was married, his ring was conspicuous, and the media had documented his marriage extensively. Serena fueled Donovan's flirtation. To her, men like Donovan offered not just adventure, but entry into circles with deeper pockets. The moral transgression didn't worry her. She had grown accustomed to seeing powerful men cheat on their wives, and in her line of work, infidelity was treated as a negotiable taboo. Before the yacht docked, Donovan and Serena shared a clandestine kiss on the upper deck, hidden from prying eyes by the summer darkness. Donovan told himself it was just a fleeting moment of indiscretion. He was a man on top of the world. Why shouldn't he savor every flavor of pleasure life offered? But fleeting infatuations can quickly grow into an all-consuming secret. When Donovan returned to New York, he found excuses to see Serena again, ostensibly for business, though they both knew it was anything but. She became his shadow at exclusive clubs, late-night penthouse soirees and business trips where he needed a companion to keep him entertained. He showered her with designer handbags, diamond jewelry, and even helped her land more lucrative modeling gigs. Serena, for her part, clung to Donovan's generosity, offering him the rush of a hidden romance he couldn't get from his stable married life. Weeks turned into months, and their affair deepened. Serena reveled in the luxurious life Donovan provided: 5-star hotels, exotic vacations, lavish gifts. Meanwhile, Donovan craved her presence like a drug, ignoring any semblance of guilt. He told himself Elizabeth was preoccupied with her charities. Her pregnancy, there was no harm in letting off some steam. In a moment of recklessness, Donovan invited Serena to spend a weekend at Beauclair Mansion. It was an impulsive plan, born from a chaotic swirl of desire and pride. After all, Elizabeth was supposed to be spending those days in Manhattan for a friend's baby shower, or so Donovan believed. Little did he realize Elizabeth had cut her city trip short, too exhausted to endure the social rigmarole, and determined to relax in her own home. Destiny was about to orchestrate a collision of secrets, lies, and revelations that would upend everyone's lives. Under the silver glow of a crescent moon, Donovan's limousine glided up to Beauclair Mansion's gates. The estate's sweeping landscape looked hauntingly beautiful. Tall cypress trees swayed, and the ornate fountain at the entrance sparkled with watery moonbeams. Serena leaned against Donovan in the back seat, her manicured nails lightly tracing patterns on his arm. She giggled. "I can't believe you own all of this. It's like a castle from a fairy tale." "Wait until you see the inside," Donovan bragged. "Your jaw will drop." He had always wanted to show off Beauclair to Serena. It was one of his ultimate trophies, a testament to how far he'd climbed from his humble upbringing. He had told the chauffeur to arrive late, betting that the staff would be minimal at this hour. Normally, Elizabeth might have been at the mansion, but Donovan was confident she was in Manhattan until Monday. He anticipated a weekend of unrestrained passion and indulgence, free from prying eyes and moral repercussions. To ensure privacy, Donovan had earlier texted Mrs. Hathaway, Beauclair's long-standing housekeeper, telling her to take Sunday off. He explained that he had a private gathering with an important client. Mrs. Hathaway dutifully obeyed, leaving only a skeleton crew on night duty. Donovan had also given strict instructions to keep the gates closed and to remain out of sight unless summoned. Everything was orchestrated like a stage play, with Donovan as the star performer. However, Donovan's carefully crafted plan crumbled the moment the limousine approached the circular driveway. The grand double doors of the mansion swung open, and out stepped Elizabeth. Clearly pregnant, her usually gentle face etched with outrage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, the fabric of her pale blue maternity dress fluttering in the night breeze. The overhead carriage lights illuminated her figure, making her look both ethereal and formidable. Donovan felt his breath catch in his throat. Confusion and dread erupted within him. For a moment, Serena was just as stupefied, her eyes darting between Donovan and the furious woman on the threshold. "Who is that?" she whispered sharply, though deep down she suspected the answer. No one spoke as the driver opened the door. Donovan stepped out first, feeling as though he were walking into a vortex of shame and disbelief. Elizabeth's voice finally cut through the silence. "So it's true," she hissed. "All the late nights, the secret phone calls, I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid." Donovan opened his mouth but couldn't form words. Elizabeth's expression twisted a lethal mix of heartbreak and anger. Her gaze flicked to Serena, who also emerged from the limousine, her face partially hidden by large designer sunglasses she'd neglected to remove. For a second, Serena contemplated slinking back inside the car, but she was too frozen to move. Beneath the mansion's elegant facade, the entire world was about to unravel. Inside Beauclair's sweeping foyer, marbled floors gleamed under a chandelier of crystal teardrops. Donovan stood rooted near the grand staircase, Serena a few feet behind him, feeling acutely like an intruder. Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, demanded answers. Her voice echoed off the polished surfaces, driving home the magnitude of this confrontation. "How long has this been going on?" she shouted, eyes locked on Donovan. "How many times have you lied to me?" Serena's gaze darted nervously. She cleared her throat and decided on an apology, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I'm so sorry." I didn't realize Elizabeth cut her off. Didn't realize what exactly? That he has a wife? That I'm carrying his children? Her voice trembled with bitterness, and her hands pressed against her swollen belly. Donovan finally snapped out of his stupor. "Elizabeth!" He began stepping closer. "I didn't mean for any of this." She pulled away, tears shimmering on the brink. "Don't come near me." At that moment, thunder rumbled in the distance. It felt as though nature itself lamented the betrayal unfolding within Beauclair's walls. Donovan's mind churned, searching for a plausible explanation, an apology, a gesture that might quell the fury and heartbreak swirling through the foyer. Yet nothing he could say would excuse what he'd done. Behind him, Serena said softly, "I'll just get my things and go." She aimed for an exit strategy, hoping to salvage any shred of dignity. But Elizabeth wasn't done. "So you leave now, and what then? Another rendezvous in some penthouse next week? Another weekend in a mansion you both think you own?" She shot Donovan a look of pure venom. "You want to embarrass me in front of the entire world, Donovan, because the paparazzi will eat this alive. There's no hiding from it." A hush enveloped them, broken only by the faint pitter-patter of rain starting outside. Serena gripped her handbag, panic in her eyes. Donovan realized in that instant the severity of his situation. A pregnant wife, a mistress, and a public image that could collapse under the weight of scandal. Before anyone could speak again, Elizabeth crumpled to her knees, a sharp cry escaping her lips. Donovan rushed to her side, alarmed. "Elizabeth!" he exclaimed. "What's wrong?" Her face contorted in pain, her arms instinctively encircling her belly. I think something's wrong with the babies." The sight of Elizabeth in apparent distress jolted Donovan's paternal instincts. He forgot about Serena, about the affair, about everything else. He scooped Elizabeth into his arms. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, voice trembling. At his instruction, the still-present chauffeur quickly rearranged plans to drive to the nearest emergency room. By now, Serena was shaking, unsure if she should stay or slip out unnoticed. Ultimately, she followed them to the limousine perched uncomfortably in the back seat, while Donovan cradled Elizabeth. The ride felt like an eternity each second, thick with tension and fear. Never had Donovan felt so powerless. This was not a financial crisis he could fix with a quick injection of capital or a brilliant stock trade. He was on the brink of losing everything he claimed mattered to him, and possibly even losing the unborn children he had so carelessly taken for granted. They arrived at St. Bernardine's Medical Center in the dead of night, the doors of the emergency ward sliding open under harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses rushed Elizabeth into an examination room, Donovan trailing closely behind. He hovered by her side, watching with dread as monitors beeped and doctors administered IV lines. Serena lingered in the waiting area, hands clasped tightly, face pale. She felt starkly out of place. A nurse, noticing her anxious demeanor, whispered, Are you family? Serena shook her head, barely managing a polite smile. She took a seat, struggling with a mix of guilt, fear, and resentment. Resentment toward Donovan for putting her in this humiliating position. Guilt for playing a role in what might be a catastrophic medical emergency. Inside the examination room, the obstetrician delivered cautious news. Elizabeth was having contractions prematurely, possibly triggered by emotional stress. The babies were at risk if her blood pressure didn't stabilize soon. Donovan felt a crushing weight. This was the real consequence of his duplicity. Not just an angry spouse or a ruined social reputation, but the potential harm to innocent lives. With quiet efficiency, Elizabeth was transferred to a private room in the maternity wing. Donovan sat by her bedside, stroking her hand, feeling both helpless and regretful. He tried to speak to offer some comfort, but Elizabeth flinched away. Her eyes flickered with pain and betrayal. She was a woman who had given her heart, body, and trust to a man who'd taken all three for granted. Hours crawled by. The hospital's white corridors and antiseptic odor provided the backdrop for Donovan's introspection. He had always prided himself on having control over markets, over deals, over his life's narrative. Yet here he was, powerless. In the waiting area, Serena wrestled with her own turmoil. She texted a friend. Stuck at a hospital. Disaster night. Call you later. She couldn't bring herself to leave. A part of her needed closure, needed Donovan to acknowledge her. But as dawn approached, she realized how naive that longing was. She overheard bits of conversation between nurses. Elizabeth was stabilized, the twins appeared unharmed for now. But the emotional damage was incalculable. Eventually, Donovan emerged from Elizabeth's room, dark circles under his eyes. He approached Serena, who stood up hastily, her posture stiff. In the empty corridor, they exchanged hushed words. Are you okay? Serena asked, her voice trembling with concern. Not really. Donovan admitted, his tone frayed. Elizabeth's resting now. The babies seem to be okay, but it was close. I can't. He swallowed, unable to complete the thought. Serena nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. I didn't want this to happen. Donovan let out a shaky breath. Go back to the mansion. Or a hotel. I'll make arrangements for you. But I can't leave Elizabeth. Serena searched his face, hoping for some signal that their relationship mattered. Instead, she saw a broken man, guilt-ridden and desperate to cling to his wife and unborn children. Words felt futile. She only managed a nod, before turning to walk away, the corridor lights flickering overhead like a silent judgment. In that moment, Donovan understood that the life he thought he could compartmentalize was shattered. There would be no neat division between his respectable existence with Elizabeth and his clandestine affair with Serena. Everything had collided, and the fallout would test every inch of his fortitude and Elizabeth's. News travels fast in privileged circles. By mid-morning, Elizabeth's parents, Andrew and Caroline Radcliffe, arrived at the hospital in a flurry of concern and indignation. Caroline, her posture ramrod straight, confronted Donovan in the corridor. "You liar!" she hissed, jabbing a finger at his chest. "You made promises, Donovan. My daughter's life and the lives of my grandchildren are at risk because of your disgraceful behavior." Andrew, a gentle man by nature, seemed older and more frail than usual, grief etching lines across his face. "I trusted you," he said softly, his voice laden with disappointment. "You were the one who insisted on waiting for children until you were ready to be a father. and now this Donovan bowed his head, too ashamed to meet their gazes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Truly I am. Nothing I say will justify what happened." Caroline gave a scornful laugh. "That's about the only honest thing you've said so far." With Elizabeth stable but emotionally shattered, the medical staff advised minimal stress to prevent another crisis. It was agreed that for now, Donovan could stay at the hospital. He was, after all, Elizabeth's next of kin, but the Radcliffes made it clear they'd watch him like hawks. Every hour, Donovan checked in on Elizabeth, who maintained a stony silence. She gazed out the window, tears occasionally sliding down her cheeks. Sometimes Donovan tried to hold her hand or whisper an apology. Each time, she pulled away. When evening arrived, the Radcliffes insisted on a family discussion without Elizabeth. Donovan, Andrew, and Caroline convened in a small hospital cafeteria, the smell of coffee and antiseptic heavy in the air. The conversation was tense voices, kept to a low hush. Caroline wasted no time. "Donovan, we want you to leave Elizabeth alone until she recovers. You'll take care of her medical expenses, of course, but you're to stay away until she explicitly asks for you." "Understood." Donovan's mouth felt dry. "Elizabeth is my wife. I can't abandon her in the hospital." Andrew softened his tone. "We're not saying abandon her. We're saying give her space. Right now, your presence might be doing more harm than good." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Who knows how many indiscretions you've had behind her back? As far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of explaining to do." "Yes," Andrew agreed. "And perhaps to a divorce lawyer as well." The word divorce lodged like a bullet in Donovan's chest. He'd never considered that Elizabeth might actually leave him and take the children with her. The possibility ripped open a chasm of fear. At that moment, Donovan realized how precarious his entire empire was. Losing Elizabeth didn't just mean losing the facade of a happy marriage. It could also mean losing the moral anchor that had partially legitimatized his high society persona. Without Elizabeth, Donovan Pierce was just another scheming, heartless tycoon with questionable ethics and no family to give him depth or redemption. "Please," he murmured, voice raw. "Don't talk of divorce yet. Let me do whatever it takes to earn her trust back." Caroline exhaled sharply. "That's up to Elizabeth. For now, respect her wishes. If she wants to see you, fine. If she doesn't, you'll keep away." Donovan nodded, too grief-stricken to argue. The only thing that mattered now was Elizabeth's health and the safety of the twins. Little by little, he realized the irreparable damage he'd caused. If he ever wanted to regain Elizabeth's love, or even her tolerance, he would have to face an arduous road of restitution, if such a thing was even possible. The weekend passed in a blur. Elizabeth showed signs of improvement, though her emotional wounds were far from healed. Donovan took Caroline's advice and stayed mostly away, visiting briefly when Elizabeth gave the green light. He spent his nights at a penthouse suite in a nearby hotel, making calls to business associates and cancelling all non-essential trips. Serena Quinn, meanwhile, disappeared from his immediate orbit. He'd arranged for her to stay in a luxurious suite at the Ritz-Carlton, and he covered the tab without question. Their exchanges were reduced to terse text messages. She resented being sidelined, but had no choice. During this tumultuous period, Donovan discovered that personal crises had a way of exposing hidden vulnerabilities in his business empire. A damaging rumor circulated that he was stepping away from Pierce Capital Management due to family issues. Boards of directors, already anxious about market fluctuations, began to question the stability of Donovan's leadership. Some clients hinted they might shift their funds elsewhere if Donovan couldn't personally oversee their accounts. In the midst of these professional woes, Donovan received an unexpected visitor, Rita Halberd, a young journalist from a prominent financial magazine. Rita had sensed the scandal swirling around the Pierce household and wanted an exclusive story. She cornered Donovan in the hospital lobby, a polite but determined expression on her face. "Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry to bother you at this difficult time." She began pressing the record button on her phone. "But rumors are circulating about trouble in your personal life affecting your company. Is there any comment you'd like to make?" Donovan forced a composed smile. "I don't discuss personal matters with the press, Miss Halberd. My family is my priority right now. Pierce Capital Management remains fully operational." Rita persisted. "Any truth to the allegations about an affair causing your wife's hospitalization?" His jaw clenched. No comment. When a security guard intervened, escorting Rita away, Donovan felt a jolt of dread. Despite his best attempts to keep the scandal under wraps, the story was leaking. He later discovered that paparazzi photos of him and Serena in Monte Carlo had been making rounds online, fueling speculation. The worst part was that Elizabeth's heartbreak was now tabloid fodder. Back at Beauclair Mansion, Elizabeth returned to recuperate under medical supervision. Her parents insisted on staying with her, but she also had some quiet moments to reflect. Late one afternoon, Elizabeth found her way to a seldom-used drawing room lined with dusty oil paintings of the estate's previous owners. There she sank into a velvet armchair, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. Her mind replayed the last few days, the confrontation, the hospital, scare, the taste of betrayal. She recalled times when Donovan had been tender and loving, such as the night he proposed. He had taken her to a small island off the coast of Croatia, where they strolled along a moonlit beach. He promised her a life of wonder and fulfillment. Now those sweet memories clashed with the stinging reality of his infidelity. She wondered if she had been naive, ignoring subtle warning signs all along. The late-night calls, the new cologne that smelled nothing like Donovan's usual preference, the random missing hours he could never fully explain. Perhaps she should have confronted him sooner. Perhaps she should have demanded he slow down, focus on their marriage before it was too late. But regrets, she realized, could never undo the present. In a small burst of determination, Elizabeth pressed a hand against her belly. The twins moved gently, as if sensing her emotions. She whispered, "We'll be okay. With or without him, we'll make it." For all her heartbreak, Elizabeth realized she wasn't powerless. She had the children to think about, and her own dignity. If Donovan thought he could just walk in and out of their lives at will, he was mistaken. Serena Quinn, temporarily sequestered in the Ritz-Carlton, found that the novelty of plush robes and room service quickly waned when tethered to a scandal. She felt like a caged bird, feeding on scraps of reassurance from Donovan's sporadic texts. "We'll talk soon," he would say, or "Need time to handle family matters." Weeks ago, Serena would have found these messages acceptable, even promising. Now they felt dismissive. She resented being treated as an inconvenient afterthought. One evening, in a fit of frustration, she sought out an old friend in the city, a PR specialist named Miranda Vale. Over cocktails, Serena vented about her predicament, the broken promises, the mansion fiasco, and her uncertain future. Miranda listened with rapt attention, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of her martini. "You're so worried about Donovan's image," Miranda observed. "But what about yours? You stand to lose modeling contracts if this scandal blows up. Or you might actually use it to your advantage if you play your cards right." Serena bristled. She wasn't looking to become some gossip sensation. Yet the suggestion swirled in her mind. How could she salvage her own life? Maybe even elevate her status from this mess. A few days later, Miranda set up a clandestine meeting with a tabloid journalist, Kevin Brown, who was offering top dollar for an exclusive interview from the other woman. Serena vacillated. Did she really want to risk Donovan's wrath by selling their story? But the more Donovan ignored her calls, and the more anxious she felt about her livelihood, the more tempting the offer became. Finally, after one particularly icy text from Donovan, "I can't talk right now." "Please stop calling," Serena snapped. She had built her entire adult life on leveraging opportunities. Why should Donovan Pierce escape unscathed, preserving his marriage and reputation, while leaving her hung out to dry? So Serena met with Kevin Brown in a posh rooftop lounge, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf to hide her identity. She demanded a sizable sum for any details about her affair with Donovan Pierce. Kevin, practically salivating at the prospect of a sensational scoop, agreed. Over hours and multiple drinks, Serena spilled enough intimate details to fuel a front-page headline in every major tabloid. She revealed their first meeting in Monaco, the hush-hush texts, the gifts, the clandestine weekends. The only thing she kept vague was the fiasco at Beauclair Mansion. Some details, she reasoned, might prove too dangerous or humiliating if fully exposed. By the time she left, the weight on Serena's shoulders felt partially lifted. She knew the story would break soon, that Donovan would likely feel betrayed and furious. But she also knew she needed to watch out for her own interests. If Donovan wasn't going to make good on his unspoken promises, if he was going to return to Elizabeth and freeze Serena out, then maybe Serena could seize control of the narrative. In a world where wealth and reputation meant everything public sympathy could be leveraged, perhaps in the end, she'd emerge from the scandal not as a regretful mistress, but as a cunning survivor. A week later, the tabloids erupted with headlines. Exclusive model Serena Quinn speaks out on Donovan Pierce affair. The public devoured every detail like vultures on fresh carrion. Pictures of Serena in Monaco in Donovan's penthouse and near Beauclair Mansion splashed across websites and social media feeds. Gossip shows debated the morality of powerful men who think they can have it all. Stock pundits speculated whether Pierce Capital Management would suffer a mass exodus of clients. Donovan woke up to a flurry of panicked calls from business partners, lawyers, and friends. Fury coursed through him at Serena's betrayal. He drafted multiple messages to her, each more accusatory than the last. But he never pressed send. He understood that escalation could lead to more damaging revelations. Instead, he pivoted into damage control, a meeting with his legal team to discuss defamation suits, a press statement asserting that personal matters do not affect the integrity of Pierce Capital's mission, and frantic phone calls to major stakeholders reassuring them he was still firmly at the helm. Elizabeth, meanwhile, read the tabloids with disgust and heartbreak. She had heard enough from Donovan's admissions and the partial truths gleaned from staff at Beauclair. But seeing Serena's smug face on the covers made it all more real. Her parents tried to shield her from the media storm, but the magnitude was impossible to ignore. At one point, Elizabeth snapped at Caroline. "No more. I don't want to hear or see anything about that woman. It's my life, my marriage. I'll decide how to handle it." Yet a part of Elizabeth felt a strange, unexpected relief. The entire truth was now out there, no more secrets lurking. Donovan's humiliating betrayal was an open wound. Sometimes honesty, even when dragged unwillingly into the public eye, can mark the beginning of genuine healing or a definitive end. A few days into the media circus, Donovan managed to speak privately with Elizabeth at Beauclair. She was seated in the sunroom, a blanket over her lap, the warm glow of afternoon light shining through large glass windows. Her pregnancy was still precarious, but stable. A nurse milled about, ensuring Elizabeth's comfort. Donovan took a seat across from her, hands clasped. He looked thinner than usual, his eyes hollow with regret. "Elizabeth," he began, voice quivering. "I know I can never fully undo what I've done. But I want you to know I'm willing to do anything to make this right." She regarded him with a calmness that unnerved him. "You can't unbreak a heart, Donovan," she replied. "You can only see what grows from the pieces left behind." He swallowed hard, remembering the luminous woman he had married. The thought of losing her and the children shredded whatever bravado remained. "I'm committed to therapy, to counseling, anything you need. You and the twins are my priority now. I understand if you hate me, or if you'll never trust me again. But I want to try." Elizabeth let out a slow exhale. "I don't have answers yet. I need time to figure out what's best for me, and for our children. Right now, I need stability, no more public scandals, no more late-night cat-and-mouse games." "Can you promise me that much?" "Yes," Donovan whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "I promise." Elizabeth nodded. "Then give me space. Provide what I need for the babies and me. Maybe in time, we'll see if there's anything left of this marriage to salvage." Donovan rose to leave, feeling the smallest glimmer of hope. He bent down gently, kissed Elizabeth's forehead. She didn't resist, but neither did she reciprocate. He walked away with a reverent hush in his chest, determined to do better, uncertain if redemption was truly within reach. The next several months were a crucible of transformation for everyone involved. Elizabeth stayed at Beauclair Mansion, supported by private nurses and her parents. She meticulously prepared for the twins' arrival, reading parenting books, setting up a nursery, and confiding in a therapist recommended by her obstetrician. She recognized that despite Donovan's betrayal, her children deserved a father if he could prove worthy. Yet she also realized she was no longer the passive partner she might once have been. She contacted divorce lawyers, not as a definitive move, but as a precaution. Boundaries had to be drawn. Donovan embarked on a public apology tour, though not the typical kind with press conferences. Instead, he quietly reached out to key figures in his professional circle, explaining that he was going through a personal crisis and assuring them of his unwavering commitment to Pierce Capital. He donated a significant sum to maternal health charities, a gesture partly inspired by guilt, partly by a genuine desire to mend the harm. In a rare display of humility, he sought out a private counselor, a stepsister of a friend. Sessions were grueling, forcing him to confront his reckless impulses, his childhood insecurities, and the toxic pursuit of wealth as a balm for every emotion. He began to see that the same drive that made him a financial success had also corroded his personal life. Serena, meanwhile, found herself both famous and infamous. She was approached by multiple agencies to exploit her new celebrity, but serious brands viewed her as a liability. She capitalized on her notoriety by launching a line of low-tier beauty products, hawked relentlessly on social media. Certain tabloids praised her for bravery in exposing a billionaire, but the more discerning corners of society labeled her a shameless opportunist. She struggled with the knowledge that she might never escape the shadow of this scandal. On lonely nights in her new penthouse, a parting gift from a short-lived romance with another wealthy patron, she questioned whether she had really gained anything from this affair, or simply sabotaged her own integrity. As for the public, the scandal became old news once another sensational headline captured their short attention span: Donovan Pierce and Elizabeth Radcliffe. Pierce were yesterday's gossip replaced by new controversies. However, the financial world did not forget so quickly. Donovan faced extra scrutiny in every new venture. Some of his bolder clients grew leery, no longer seeing him as infallible. He moved carefully, treading water to maintain his empire's stability, while balancing the turbulent waters of his personal life. On a chilly December evening, months after the scandal first broke, Elizabeth went into labor. The staff at Beauclair hustled, calling the doctor and preparing to take her to the hospital. Donovan, who was in Manhattan finalizing a major business deal, was alerted immediately. Without hesitation, he dropped everything. He had a private helicopter on standby for emergencies, and this was certainly one. Within an hour, Donovan arrived at the hospital breathless and terrified. He found Elizabeth already in the delivery room, her face contorted with pain, her parents at her side. She spotted Donovan, and a fleeting look of relief crossed her features before another contraction seized her. All through the grueling hours, Donovan held Elizabeth's hand. Each time she cried out, he whispered words of encouragement, telling her how strong she was, how close they were to finally holding their children. If she bore any lingering resentment, it was eclipsed by the primal, overwhelming task of giving birth. At precisely 2:14 a.m., the first baby emerged a boy, with tiny flailing limbs and a robust cry. The doctor smiled. "He's healthy," she announced, placing the newborn on Elizabeth's chest. A minute later, his twin sister followed, smaller, but equally vocal about her entrance into the world. Donovan was unable to contain his tears as he beheld his children for the first time. He kissed Elizabeth's forehead, flooding with gratitude, regret, and awe all at once. Elizabeth turned to look at him, tears in her own eyes, and gave a single nod of acknowledgement. It was too soon to say if forgiveness was in the cards, but at that moment they were bound by the pure miracle of these new lives. In the weeks following the twins' birth, a cautious détente settled over Beauclair Mansion. Elizabeth allowed Donovan to stay in a guest suite. He took paternal leave from Pierce Capital, focusing on midnight feedings, diaper changes, and singing lullabies. The cracks in their relationship remained, but caring for their infants forged a tenuous bridge. The twins, named Alexander and Amelia, became the center of everyone's world. Donovan discovered that holding these fragile beings in his arms gave him a sense of purpose far beyond financial gain. Some nights he'd find Elizabeth gazing at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at how dedicated a father he'd become. Other nights, tensions rose particularly when the memory of his betrayal loomed. But the babies acted as a balm, reminding both parents that they had two tiny reasons to try. Elizabeth's parents helped, but eventually they returned to their own estate, trusting that Elizabeth was strong enough now to stand on her own. A wave of quiet negotiations began between Elizabeth's legal team and Donovan's lawyers' discussions about trusts for the children, potential separation agreements, property, settlements. Yet Elizabeth remained non-committal about a final decision. She sought more clarity on Donovan's sincerity before making her choice. At times, Donovan found himself on the edge of losing patience. He wanted redemption, wanted Elizabeth to declare that they could fully reconcile. But each time he felt that eagerness, he reminded himself that trust once shattered cannot be hastily mended. He forced himself to give Elizabeth space to keep proving day by day that he could be the man she and their children deserved. And so life took on a quiet rhythm. Nighttime feedings under the mansion's vaulted ceilings, squeals of newborn laughter in the morning, and guarded conversations in the afternoon. Donovan learned that fatherhood wasn't just a new label, it was an all-consuming transformative role. And Elizabeth, for all her heartbreak, found moments of solace watching Donovan cradle their infants, singing lullabies in a soft, unsteady voice she'd never heard from him before. Winter gradually yielded to spring, bringing fresh growth to Beauclair's gardens. Sunlight filtered through newly budded branches, and the estate's fountain sparkled under warmer skies. The twins reached 3 months old, their personalities beginning to blossom. Alexander was feisty, always squirming, while Amelia was calmer, observing the world with large, curious eyes. One afternoon, after putting the twins down for a nap, Donovan and Elizabeth found themselves alone in the mansion's reading room. The subdued light cast gentle shadows on the library shelves. It was the first time in weeks they'd had a private moment uninterrupted by crying babies or house staff. Elizabeth studied Donovan for a long moment. "I've seen a change in you," she said quietly. He felt his chest tighten. "I've never been more serious about anything. These months with the twins with you, they've shown me what really matters." Elizabeth pressed her lips together, tears threatening to surface. "I don't trust you fully yet," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I see you trying. And I care that our children have a real family." Donovan reached for her hand. She allowed him to take it this time, though her grip was tentative. "I love you," he said with fervor. "I always have in my own flawed way." She closed her eyes, letting tears slip through. In that vulnerable moment, Elizabeth acknowledged that despite the immense pain Donovan had caused, she still loved him too. Love wasn't a neat equation. It was messy, painful, beautiful, and worth fighting for sometimes. No magical instant of absolute forgiveness followed. Instead, they shared a deep, trembling embrace. Perhaps it was the start of building anew, or maybe a final farewell. But for that moment, it was enough to close the distance that had been tearing them apart. Over time, marriage counseling sessions were arranged. Trust exercises, honest conversations, and raw confessions filled many evenings. Donovan penned a heartfelt letter to Elizabeth, acknowledging every lie and vow he had broken. Elizabeth read it through tears, then wrote a response describing her own fears and disappointments. Though the future remained uncertain, both were willing to try. For the sake of the twins, for the sake of their own hearts, they forged ahead, cautious, hopeful, and forever changed. Months passed gradually, healing old wounds, though scars lingered. Donovan and Elizabeth decided to continue living at Beauclair, turning it into a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. The staff treated Donovan with polite reserve, aware of the rift in the household, but also noticing the genuine effort he invested in fatherhood. Serena Quinn drifted to the periphery of their lives. She launched a small cosmetics brand online, capitalizing on her short-lived tabloid fame, but her presence receded from major headlines. Donovan never reached out to her, and she, sensing no benefit to further contact, eventually moved on to new opportunities. Rumors linked her to an international art dealer, but the story never garnered much attention. In time, the media found fresh scandals to chase. Donovan's public persona stabilized as he demonstrated consistent leadership in his company, all the while making philanthropic gestures, no doubt influenced by Elizabeth's passions. Some cynics claimed he was simply buying redemption, but those closer to him sensed that fatherhood and near loss had sparked a more meaningful shift. Elizabeth remained cautious. Though she allowed Donovan back into her bed, she set firm boundaries about honesty and transparency. She demanded and received proof of Donovan's finances, phone records, and schedules. Some nights guilt gnawed at Donovan. He realized how easily he used to lie and manipulate. Now each day of truth felt like a small victory. In the hush of dawn, Donovan often rose to check on Alexander and Amelia. He found solace in their innocent breathing, their tiny bodies nestled securely in cribs. As he watched them, he whispered apologies for his past and promises for their future. Each promise was a vow to be better, a father they could respect, a husband Elizabeth could count on. Exactly 1 year after Donovan's fateful return to Beauclair, with Serena in tow, Elizabeth woke before sunrise. She gazed at Donovan sleeping beside her, his hair disheveled, his face peaceful in slumber. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the twins' nursery. Sunlight broke over the horizon, illuminating Alexander's curious expression and Amelia's gentle coos. Elizabeth scooped them into her arms, one on each hip, and felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. Shortly after, Donovan entered, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he said softly, placing a tender kiss on each baby's forehead. Then he looked at Elizabeth, searching her face for signs of acceptance. She offered a small smile. The tension that once gripped their every interaction had eased, replaced by a quiet understanding. They carried the twins downstairs to the breakfast table, where the staff prepared a light meal. Over coffee and pureed fruit for the babies, Elizabeth cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, drawing Donovan's full attention. "I'm ready to give us a real chance. No more guest suite, no more half measures. But Donovan, if you ever betray me again, that's it. We're done." He felt the air rush from his lungs, relief washing over him. "I won't. I promise." He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. Their eyes locked in a moment of unspoken agreement. Months of therapy, raw conversations, and unwavering devotion to their children had led them here, still bruised but willing to live as a unified family. The rebuilding process had been painstaking each day, a test of Donovan's sincerity and Elizabeth's capacity for forgiveness. In that single instant, they both chose hope over resentment, a future over a fractured past. From the brink of a devastating split to a fragile but genuine renewal, Donovan and Elizabeth's journey reminds us that no life is beyond repair, even in the face of betrayal, heartbreak, and public scandal. Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in pain and regret, but it's how we grow from them that truly defines our story. Through newborn cries and sleepless nights, they discovered a new depth of love and unity, proving that second chances, while never guaranteed, can blossom if nurtured with honesty and perseverance. On a frosty Christmas Eve, just as the world around them sparkled with holiday lights and promise, Nicholas Hamilton walked out of his penthouse door, leaving his pregnant wife Eliza devastated and alone. In a single hour, her world shattered. Little did she know that by morning, her face would be on every news channel across the country. What happened that night would send shockwaves through the media, and their once loving marriage, revealing a labyrinth of hidden secrets, half-truths, and alliances so dark that even Nick, the man at the heart of it all, never imagined they'd see the light of day. Nicholas Hamilton was born into a life most people only dream about. His father, Charles Hamilton III, ran a prestigious financial conglomerate, Hamilton Global Holdings, with connections to old Wall Street families and foreign royalty. His mother, Beatrice Hamilton, came from a line of art collectors in Europe. By the time Nick was 5, he had already visited more countries than the average person would see in a lifetime. Summers were spent at a private villa in Lake Como, winters at a family estate in Switzerland. His friends joked that Hamilton was synonymous with privilege. But with privilege often came the expectation of perfection. Nick was groomed to follow in the Hamilton lineage from a young age, finishing top of his class at Phillips Exeter Academy, then breezing through Harvard with a degree in economics. He was brilliant, daring, and undeniably charismatic. Investors found him charming at 23. Board members found him wise beyond his years at 24. By the time he was 27, Nick had garnered his first Fortune magazine cover for youngest hedge fund prodigy to make $1 billion. He basked in it. He reveled in the accolades in the press and in the power he held over markets. Yet behind the carefully tailored suits and the opulent parties like the annual Hamilton Charity Ball at the Plaza, Nick carried a hollowness he could never quite shake. The constant pressure to outdo himself, to exceed the lofty bar set by his parents, and the relentless scrutiny of the media weighed on him like an anchor. And then came Eliza. Eliza Jordan was the kind of woman no one would ever guess would end up with a billionaire. She hailed from a modest background in upstate New York, her parents running a small diner famous for its apple pie. Eliza grew up working behind the counter, greeting travelers off Interstate 90 and listening to their stories. She developed an open, warm demeanor and an empathetic heart. After college, she dreamed of moving to Manhattan and becoming an investigative journalist. She idolized Christiane Amanpour and Anderson Cooper, determined to make her mark. But big breaks are hard to come by. She spent months pitching stories to local stations, blogging on the side, and occasionally freelancing for small publications. Her first real job in the city, ironically, had nothing to do with journalism. She became a research assistant for a non-profit legal firm investigating corporate malfeasance. One grey November afternoon, she found herself in the middle of a high-profile press conference. A whistleblower was about to expose an executive's dubious dealings, and the press had gathered in droves. It was there that Eliza first crossed paths with Nick Hamilton. He wasn't implicated in the scandal. In fact, his philanthropic foundation was partially funding the non-profit she worked for. He arrived impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying an air of confidence that made every head turn. Eliza, holding a thick binder of legal documents, nearly bumped into him as she rushed to hand over some last-minute notes to her boss. "Careful," Nick said gently as papers flew everywhere. "We wouldn't want to compromise your hard work." She looked up, cheeks flushing. I'm so sorry," Nick knelt, helping her collect the documents. Their eyes locked for only a second, but in that moment, the thrumming chaos of the press conference faded to a dull roar. Nick Hamilton, with all his grandeur, was kneeling on the floor, picking up papers for a woman he'd never met. He smirked. "Looks like you're the only person here more anxious than I am." Eliza laughed, nerves loosening. "This is my first big press event. I'd hate to drop the ball." When Nick handed her the final stack of papers, their fingertips grazed. In that fleeting touch, Eliza felt something shift within her. For Nick, it was as if he'd found something honest in a world too often painted in shades of pretense. Their relationship blossomed faster than either expected. Nick was used to women who were impressed by his money, who saw him as a golden ticket to an elite lifestyle. He'd grown wary of that brand of attention. But Eliza was different, warm, unpretentious, and passionately curious about the world. She was initially skeptical. Men like Nick often wore masks. But after a few dinners, early morning coffees near her modest apartment in Queens, and a few philanthropic events they attended together, she realized how genuine his empathy was. When Nick talked about philanthropic projects like funding medical clinics in rural Peru, Eliza's eyes lit up. She asked deeper questions about the people his foundation served, the cultures, and the structural problems that led to inequality. Nick found himself confiding in her. He spoke of the pressure his family placed on him, the exhaustion that came from constantly performing, constantly being the perfect Hamilton heir. Eliza listened, never judging, never rushing to offer hollow solutions. She made him feel seen, not as the billionaire mogul, but as a flawed human being who just wanted to find meaning. Slowly, their weekends became getaways from the crowded Manhattan scene to quiet corners of the Adirondacks. Nick taught her to ski, she taught him how to cook basic meals, and they binge-watched documentaries about journalism heroes. Despite coming from different worlds, they fit perfectly, each rounding out the other's vulnerabilities. One spring evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Nick proposed. It wasn't at some grand gala or a glamorous trip to Paris. He did it in her tiny kitchen in Queens Flower, dusting his cufflinks because they'd just attempted to bake a pizza from scratch. Eliza cried tears of joy, whispering yes through her sobs. The wedding was a whirlwind. The Hamilton name demanded a level of pomp and ceremony. The tabloids ate up every detail. Eliza initially wanted a small, simple affair, but Nick's parents insisted on hosting it at the Hamilton family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling manor that had hosted senators, tech moguls, and even European nobility on occasion. A sea of paparazzi camped outside the estate gates, hoping to snap photos of the commoner bride who had captured the heart of the heir. Celebrity friends of the Hamiltons attended, including business magnates like Bill Gates and well-known figures like Oprah Winfrey, who happened to admire the Hamilton Foundation's philanthropic efforts. Even Elon Musk was rumored to have sent a personal note of congratulations, referencing a conversation he'd had with Nick about future humanitarian projects on Mars, half joke, half serious, in Musk's typical fashion. Eliza felt swept away by the spectacle. As she walked down the aisle, it was hard not to be overwhelmed by the cameras and the crowd. Still, when she locked eyes with Nick at the altar, everything else fell away. In that moment, it was just them. They kissed amid applause, and the newly christened Mrs. Eliza Hamilton tried not to think about the mountain of expectations that came with her new last name. The first year of marriage was blissful, filled with philanthropic trips and adjusting to a new home, a luxurious but surprisingly cozy penthouse overlooking Central Park. Eliza settled into the role of philanthropic advisor, working with Nick's foundation to evaluate projects and travel to underfunded communities. Yet beneath the veneer of happiness, tension brewed. Nick's father, Charles Hamilton III, had never fully embraced Eliza. Though he was polite, there was an undercurrent of disapproval in every question he asked about her background, her career aspirations, her ability to handle the social demands of being a Hamilton. Beatrice Hamilton was more welcoming, but she too had her reservations, always measuring Eliza against an invisible, impossibly high standard. The tabloids didn't help. They followed Eliza relentlessly, scouring her small-town past for anything unsavory. They spun half-truths into headlines like "Small-Town Girl in Over Her Head" and "Hamilton Bride Ambition" or "Love." Nick tried to shield her, but every magazine cover was another reminder that her every move was being dissected. Despite these pressures, Nick and Eliza tried to keep their relationship strong. They'd have weekly date nights away from prying eyes, sometimes sneaking into a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in the Bronx, other times strolling through Riverside Park, disguised in baseball caps. But as Nick's responsibilities at Hamilton Global Holdings grew, so did the demands on his time. Late-night strategy sessions, flights to Hong Kong, endless phone calls with investors. Eliza found herself alone in a penthouse full of staff, She barely knew her attempts at philanthropic projects, overshadowed by the press's fascination with her personal life. After 2 years of navigating high society philanthropic travels and the unrelenting scrutiny of the media, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Nick early one morning, surprising him with a tiny pair of baby booties she'd bought at a local boutique. Nick's face lit up. He scooped her into his arms, promising to scale back his work to be a present, loving father. For a while, Nick tried to make good on that promise. He turned down some late-night meetings, delegated more tasks to his trusted friend and CFO Joshua Pierce. Eliza, radiant and hopeful, started imagining their future as a family. She even pictured moving to a quieter brownstone in Brooklyn, where a child could grow up with parks and a sense of neighborhood. Then reality intruded. A major deal was brewing at Hamilton Global Holdings, one that involved a merger with a European bank partially owned by a Middle Eastern sovereign fund. It was complicated, volatile, and could catapult the Hamilton empire into a new stratosphere if handled correctly. Charles Hamilton III insisted Nick oversee negotiations personally. Nick's calendar filled once again. Eliza tried to be understanding, but each day she felt more like a bystander than a wife. When she brought up her concerns, Nick would reassure her. "Just a little longer, Eliza. After this, we'll take that long vacation to the Maldives, away from everything." Still, the baby grew inside her, and with it a gnawing uncertainty about their direction. As December arrived, New York transformed into a wonderland of sparkling lights and holiday cheer. The Hamilton family was expected to spend Christmas Eve at the Connecticut estate. Eliza, now nearly 7 months pregnant, wanted nothing more than a cozy celebration with Nick, her parents who planned to drive down from upstate, and maybe a few close friends. But the Hamiltons had a tradition, a lavish Christmas Eve ball that served as a fundraiser for their foundation. Politicians, celebrities, and Fortune 500 CEOs were all on the invite list. Charles and Beatrice pressed for Eliza to attend to show that the future mother of the Hamilton heir supported the family's philanthropic legacy. Nick was torn. On the one hand, he knew Eliza was exhausted physically and emotionally. On the other, the ball was a chance to seal deals and glean more support for the upcoming merger. He assured her it would be less formal than usual, that she could just make a brief appearance, wave hello, and retire early. Eliza reluctantly agreed. She chose a simple emerald gown that accentuated her baby bump, hoping to avoid the flamboyance that usually came with Hamilton events. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. On Christmas Eve, the Hamilton estate bustled with staff in black uniforms, preparing canapes and setting tables with fine china. A string quartet played softly, while guests arrived in limousines and expensive cars. The media lingered beyond the tall iron gates, waiting for glimpses of the glamorous soiree. Eliza arrived with Nick stepping out of their Bentley to the pop of flash photography. Nick placed a protective hand on her back, guiding her inside. The mansion was festooned with glittering Christmas trees, each meticulously decorated in a different holiday theme. Inside the who's who of society mingled CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, foreign dignitaries, and celebrities. Eliza felt the subtle glances at her growing belly, heard the whispered remarks about the next Hamilton generation. She tried to keep her head up, reminding herself it was for a good cause. Nick left her side to speak with a group of European bankers. Eliza found herself adrift, heading to the open terrace for some fresh air. There she found Joshua Pierce, Nick's longtime friend and CFO, sipping a glass of champagne. "Josh," she greeted him. "Nick is working again, I see." He offered a sympathetic smile. I tried to convince him to dial it down for tonight, but you know how he is, especially with the merger negotiations at such a delicate stage. Eliza's shoulders sagged. I just wish we could have one night of normalcy. Before Joshua could respond, a hush fell over the terrace. Charles Hamilton III emerged with a small entourage. He beckoned Eliza closer. We need you and Nick inside for a photo with the board members. It's important for the Hamilton image. Fighting the urge to roll her eyes, Eliza followed. She stood by Nick, plastering on a polite smile, while cameras flashed. Beyond the lenses, she spotted her parents looking overwhelmed and somewhat lost among the crowd. Her heart ached. She wanted to go to them to share a moment of normal Christmas cheer. But in an instant, Nick was pulled away again this time by a group of donors from Dubai. Eliza was about to follow when a sudden wave of dizziness overtook her. She hadn't eaten much all day, and her pregnancy made her more prone to fatigue. She steadied herself on a nearby chair, blinking away black spots. Just then she heard it, a muffled but heated argument emanating from behind one of the closed doors leading to Charles Hamilton's study. She recognized Nick's voice, tense and furious. Another voice retorted, Charles Hamilton. Against her better judgment, Eliza moved closer to the door. She heard fragments. Not your puppet, the legacy bad time. The baby, my decision. Each snippet ratcheted up her alarm. Suddenly the door swung open. Nick stood there, face flushed, eyes wild with anger. His father was behind him, cold rage emanating from his typically composed features. Nick's gaze flicked to Eliza. We're leaving, he said, voice trembling. He grabbed her hand and stormed through the corridor out of the mansion, ignoring the startled glances of guests. Eliza followed, stumbling in her heels, her pregnant belly making swift movement awkward. Outside, their Bentley driver scrambled to open the door, but Nick waved him off. He pressed a button on his key fob, and the car's engine roared to life. They sped off the estate grounds, Christmas lights receding in the rearview mirror. For several minutes, Nick said nothing, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Eliza finally mustered the courage to ask Nick what happened. He exhaled a shaky breath. I can't keep doing this. My father is pushing me toward decisions that threaten everything I've built. He wants me to sacrifice our personal life for the good of the Hamilton name. It's always about the legacy. Always. Eliza swallowed. But what does that mean for us? Nick glanced at her eyes darting from her belly to her face. I don't know anymore. They drove in silence back to the penthouse. Nick barely spoke as they entered their lavish penthouse. Christmas decorations twinkled in the foyer, gold ornaments on a towering tree, wreaths on marble pillars, and the faint scent of cinnamon from scented candles. It felt eerily disconnected from the tension swirling in the air. Eliza tried to confront him gently. Nick, talk to me. He turned abruptly, his eyes filled with a turmoil she had never seen before. I can't. God, Eliza, everything is caving in on me. The merger my father's demands the board. And now the baby. Her heart clenched. What do you mean, and now the baby? We both wanted this child. He raked a hand through his hair. Yes, I did. I do. But everything is crashing down all at once. My father is threatening to revoke my position if I don't follow his plan. The press is hounding us. I can't breathe, Eliza. Tears welled in her eyes. So what, you're going to run away from me? From us? He paced across the marble floor. I need space. I can't think straight. I've never felt so trapped. A wave of pain, not physical, but emotional, coursed through her. She lowered herself onto a sofa, trying not to sob. I'm 7 months pregnant and you're talking about needing space, Nick. We're supposed to be a team. He grabbed his coat and keys. I'm sorry, he whispered, but I can't be here tonight. I just need to clear my head. Panic seized her. Nick, it's Christmas Eve. Nick's expression was torn, but his voice was resolute. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. I need this. And before she could say another word, he walked out of the penthouse. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent rooms. Eliza found herself alone, disbelief turning to shock. She sat there staring at the Christmas tree lights, flickering like distant stars. The baby moved inside her belly, a cruel reminder that she was not alone, but also a reminder that her husband had just left her on Christmas Eve. She tried calling him, no answer. She tried texting, no response. Christmas carols played softly on the home's integrated speaker system, an unwanted soundtrack to her heartbreak. She thought about calling her parents, but she couldn't bear to ruin their night. They were still at the Hamilton estate, likely feeling out of place. She didn't want them driving back in the dark on icy roads, just because of Nick's meltdown. Eliza paced the penthouse terrace, streaking her cheeks, until exhaustion took over in the early hours of the morning. She finally fell into a fitful sleep, the TV in the living room still glowing with late-night talk shows and replays of holiday specials. When Eliza woke around dawn, a sense of dread still clung to her daughter's tormentor. She padded into the living room, searching for any sign of Nick's return. The sofa was empty, the penthouse silent. Feeling restless, she turned on the news. Initially, it was just background noise, holiday segments, weather reports, traffic updates. Then something caught her eye on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Breaking Hamilton family drama. Her stomach tightened. She turned up the volume. The anchor spoke in a grave tone. In an unexpected twist. This Christmas morning, shocking events have unfolded around the Hamilton family empire. Reports indicate that Nicholas Hamilton, heir to Hamilton Global Holdings, has left his pregnant wife, Eliza Hamilton, and is currently unaccounted for. We have unconfirmed details suggesting a possible connection to the highly anticipated European merger. Stay tuned. Eliza's mouth went dry. Her phone began to vibrate with incoming calls and texts. She switched to another channel, the same story, more speculation. A photo of her taken at the Christmas Eve ball filled the screen. The words, "Where is Nicholas Hamilton?" scrawled beneath. Panic consumed her. Why was the media reporting this so quickly? Why were they implicating her in the same breath as the merger? She attempted to call Nick again, straight to voicemail. Within minutes, the doorman of her building called up. "Mrs. Hamilton, we have half a dozen reporters in the lobby. They want a statement. Shall I call security?" Eliza's heart pounded. She felt cornered, confused. She had no idea what was happening or why it was happening so fast. All she knew was that her husband had walked out on Christmas Eve, and now the world seemed to know and wanted answers. She needed help. In a panic, she dialed Joshua Pierce. His line rang 4 times before he answered in a groggy voice. "Eliza, what time is it?" She explained the situation, voice trembling. "The news channels are talking about me, about Nick, and about some scandal with the merger." "Josh, I'm scared, he cursed under his breath. I just woke up to a flurry of messages too. Listen, I'll come over. Don't say anything to the press until I get there. Keep your doors locked. If Nick calls, let me know. Within half an hour, Joshua arrived looking as rattled as she felt. He wore a hastily thrown-on sweater and jeans, not his usual immaculate suit. Outside, Eliza could see camera crews gathering on the sidewalk. I've been trying to reach Nick too, Joshua said, after hugging her gently. No luck. This rumor about him disappearing and leaving you on Christmas Eve. Well, it's half true, I guess. The media's spinning it as a meltdown tied to the merger. They're also claiming you might have threatened to expose some of Hamilton Global's internal dealings. Eliza's eyes widened. What? That's absurd. I've never done anything like that. Joshua grimaced. I know, but gossip feeds on confusion. People smell blood in the water. Charles Hamilton must be in damage control mode. They probably want you to keep quiet. She felt a fresh wave of anger and hurt. Nick promised he'd come back. Now he's not answering. And I'm the one under the microscope. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this, Joshua said, pulling out his laptop. We'll try to contact the Hamilton PR team, figure out the real story. Over the next several hours, the media frenzy intensified. Shots of Eliza's face from the night before, a tearful expression as she left the estate, were plastered on news networks and gossip websites. Speculation ran wild. Did Nick leave because he feared fatherhood? Were there financial irregularities about to be exposed? Was Eliza blackmailing the Hamiltons? The speculation about blackmail stung the most. Eliza had never sought money or influence from Nick. She'd always tried to be independent, even after marrying into wealth. As the day wore on, Joshua managed to speak with the Hamilton PR director. He relayed their statement to Eliza. They're denying all blackmail rumors, but they're also not clarifying why Nick left. They just say he's taking personal time. They want you to do the same and to avoid contact with the media. Eliza shook her head in disbelief. How can they leave me hanging like this? I'm the one left alone on Christmas, and they want me to go silent. Joshua patted her shoulder. I don't like it either. But they're probably scared. This merger is huge, and any sign of instability might kill the deal. She pressed a hand to her baby bump, feeling a reassuring kick. What about me? What if something happens? This stress can't be good for the baby. His eyes softened. I know. That's why I'm here. We'll figure out a way to protect you. Maybe you should reach out to your parents. Have them come here. Eliza nodded, tears threatening again. Yes. I need them right now. Later that afternoon, while Joshua took calls in another room, Eliza scrolled through her phone. She noticed an email with the subject line, "You need to see this." The sender was unknown, a cryptic address. She opened it hesitantly. Attached was a PDF labeled Hamilton Merger Confidential. Her heart raced. She tapped it, revealing pages of financial documents, email transcripts, and legal correspondences. It looked like evidence of wrongdoing internal communications that suggested Hamilton Global Holdings and its potential partners were engaged in questionable practices. Some lines mentioned bribes to foreign officials. Others indicated accounts in offshore tax havens. Eliza's mind spun. Was this real? Who sent it, and why send it to her? She scrolled further and found references to Nick's involvement. It seemed he might have discovered these shady dealings and was resisting them. If he refused, his father's entire plan for the merger could collapse. Could this be why Nick had stormed out? Was he being blackmailed by his own father to keep quiet, to finalize the merger? Despite potential illegalities, Eliza felt sick. If this information was legitimate, it explained the swirling rumors. Perhaps Charles Hamilton suspected Eliza would blow the whistle given her background in non-profit legal work and her investigative streak. Just as Eliza was about to show Joshua the documents, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Charles Hamilton III. Anxiety flared in her chest, but she answered. Charles's voice was controlled but cold. "Eliza, I'd advise you not to speak to the press. The situation is delicate. We wouldn't want you to misrepresent the family." Eliza's frustration boiled. "I haven't said a thing. But maybe you can tell me where Nick is." He paused. "Nick is taking time to reconsider his position. That's all you need to know. As for you, I suggest you refrain from meddling in matters that don't concern you." Anger surged. "Excuse me, I'm his wife. This concerns me and I'm carrying his child." Charles's voice took on a menacing edge. "And that is precisely why I'm telling you to tread carefully. The Hamilton name carries weight enough to protect or to destroy. Good day, Eliza." The line went dead. Eliza's hands shook. She had never liked or trusted Charles, but to hear him threaten her so openly. She knew now the documents in her inbox were the key to everything. She showed the files to Joshua, who read them with horror etched on his face. If these are real, then Hamilton Global is on the brink of committing massive fraud. This would ruin the company if it became public. Eliza was adamant. "We have to find Nick. If he's the one standing against these dealings, he could be in real danger." Joshua dialed Nick's number again. No response. He tried mutual friends, colleagues, but no one had heard from him since the night before. Eliza mulled over her options. She had enough journalistic instinct to know that handing these documents directly to the media would create a firestorm and might endanger Nick if he was somehow caught in the crosshairs. But doing nothing felt like a betrayal of all she believed in. She made a decision. "I'm going to contact an investigative journalist I trust. Not to publish yet, but to verify if these documents are genuine." Joshua nodded slowly. "Okay. We'll need to keep a low profile. The Hamilton family's PR machine will be out for blood if they suspect you're behind this leak." Eliza steeled herself, determination replacing her fear. "I won't let them bully me." Not this time. The day wore on. News trucks lined the street below the penthouse, and the media demanded a statement. The speculation grew wilder. Some tabloids claimed Nick fled the country, others that Eliza was working with the FBI. Seeking a semblance of normalcy. Eliza's parents finally arrived, escorted by building security through the back entrance. They embraced her, trying to provide comfort, but the tension was palpable. She made a few calls to her journalist acquaintance, Sarah Blake, an old college friend who now worked for a reputable newspaper. Sarah agreed to meet discreetly at a nearby cafe that evening, away from paparazzi. Despite Joshua's reservations, Eliza slipped into a cab bundled in a coat and scarf, evading the cameras by using an underground parking exit. She clutched a folder containing printouts of the leaked documents, her heart pounding at the risk. At the cafe, Sarah greeted her with a tight hug. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Eliza shrugged. "Not really, but there's something bigger happening here. I need your help verifying these files." Sarah's eyes widened as Eliza laid out the documents. She listened intently, scribbling notes. "This is huge, Eliza. If these are authentic, It implicates not just Hamilton Global, but major international players. You realize what kind of storm this could create?" Eliza exhaled. "Yes. That's why I need to be sure. My husband is missing. I believe he walked out because he discovered these unethical deals and his father was forcing his hand." Sarah nodded gravely. "I'll use my contacts to authenticate them. But once you light this fuse, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" Eliza swallowed hard. "I'll do what it takes to protect Nick and to make sure the truth comes out." Back at the penthouse, Sarah's team worked around the clock, verifying codes, cross-checking email headers, contacting industry insiders who might confirm or deny the authenticity of the documents. By the next morning, Sarah sent Eliza a secure message. "These are real. We have multiple confirmations. The scandal could break wide open." That same morning, Eliza received a text from an unknown number. "Nick is safe. If you want to see him, come to 3445 West 57th St. Parking, Level B, at 11 p.m. Alone." Eliza's heart soared with hope. But fear soon crept in. Was this a trap? She read the text to Joshua. He frowned. "That's a secluded parking garage near the old Midtown offices. It could be a setup. But if it really is Nick..." Eliza thought of her baby, her love for Nick, and the vow she made to stand by him. "I'm going. I have to." At 10:45 p.m., Eliza discreetly left the penthouse, ignoring reporters clamoring at the front. She called an Uber, instructing the driver to drop her off a block away from the address. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. She arrived at the dimly lit parking garage. The guard at the booth barely looked up from his phone as she entered on foot. Rows of parked cars stretched into the shadows. A tall figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Eliza recognized him in an instant. Nick. She breathed, tears rushing to her eyes. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. But he was there, alive, real. They rushed into each other's arms. For a moment, neither spoke, just clung to the other in desperate relief. Finally, Nick pulled back. "Eliza, I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay. I discovered things about the merger. Terrible illegal things. My father expects me to go along with it. When I refused, he threatened me. Threatened us." Eliza blinked back tears. "I know. I've seen the documents. Nick, you should have told me." He sighed. "I didn't want to drag you into this mess, but it looks like it's too late." She held his face in her hands. "We're in this together. Whatever your father is planning, whatever Hamilton Global is doing, it can't continue." Nick nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I want to expose them. I want to do the right thing. But I'm afraid of what my father will do to you, to our child." Eliza's voice firmed. "We won't hide. I've already reached out to a journalist. The story is being verified." Nick's eyes widened, a flicker of hope mixed with worry. "If we go public, it could bring down everything. My family's empire, our fortune. We'll be targets." She squeezed his hand. "I don't care about the money. I care about us, and about raising our child without a dark cloud of corruption hanging over our heads." Nick let out a shaky breath, pulling her into another embrace. "Then we do it. Together." The wind howled through Manhattan's canyons like a warning. But inside the quiet offices of the Journal, the storm had already broken. Just before noon, The headline dropped Hamilton Global's secret network bribes shell companies and a family divided. The article was front-page top-fold. Sarah Blake's team had verified every line, every document Eliza had brought to her. Nick had provided further testimony, encrypted emails, files, internal communications that traced a web of corruption tied to Hamilton Global Holdings, foreign officials, and multinational banks. The proof was irrefutable, and the world took notice. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story. Cable networks broke into regular programming. Stock tickers flashed red as Hamilton Global's valuation plunged by billions. Government agencies announced formal investigations. Social media erupted with hashtags like #HamiltonLeak and #LegacyExposed. In their penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the coverage unfold. The same media that once fawned over them now told a different story, one not of glamour, but of integrity. Nick paced in front of the TV, running a hand through his hair. "It's real now," he murmured. "No going back." Eliza stood and took his hand, grounding him. "That's the point. We don't go back. We go forward." That evening, Anderson Cooper aired a prime-time interview with Nick recorded under tight security. Nick didn't name names, but he confirmed the authenticity of the documents. He described the moral crossroads he had reached, the pressure from his father, the threats, the lies he could no longer abide. His voice shook only once when he said, "I couldn't bring a child into this world while carrying that kind of darkness." Public reaction was immediate and powerful. Some called Nick a traitor to his legacy. Others hailed him as a whistleblower who dared to stand against corruption even when it meant turning on his own blood. But in the quiet corners of their home, as Eliza held his hand and rested her other on her belly, none of that mattered. They had chosen truth. And from that choice, a different kind of legacy was being born. The fallout from the exposé was swift and seismic. Overnight, Hamilton Global Holdings transformed from a symbol of financial prestige to a cautionary tale broadcast on every news outlet in America. The company's stock nosedived. Investors scrambled to distance themselves. Regulators opened investigations not only in the US, but across Europe and the Middle East. Nick's name, once synonymous with wealth and power, now floated through headlines alongside words like whistleblower, betrayal, and courage. The media dubbed it the collapse of the Hamilton dynasty. And still through the whirlwind, Eliza and Nick stood firm. They remained at their penthouse, declining interviews and offers for book deals. Eliza focused on her pregnancy, clinging to moments of calm between the waves of public attention. Her doctor concerned by the stress advised rest and limited media exposure. So Nick turned off the television, closed the laptop, and stayed by her side. "I'm not going to lose what matters most," he told her one night, rubbing gentle circles over her swollen belly. "The company's gone. My father's empire is crumbling. But you, and him, you're what I have now." Eliza reached for his hand. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping. You let go of something rotten. That takes strength." Despite the chaos, they were not entirely alone. Joshua Pierce remained a steady presence, helping Nick manage his remaining assets. While much of Nick's fortune was tangled in Hamilton Global stock, now nearly worthless, he still had enough in independent investments to keep them secure. Public sentiment began to shift. Where once there had been whispers of scandal, now there was respect. Eliza's dignity under pressure, Nick's decision to speak out, it resonated with people. They were no longer seen as symbols of elitism, but as humans who had chosen truth over comfort. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, one thing was clear. They had not only survived the storm, they had changed the weather. They had traded privilege for principle, power for purpose. And for the first time in their lives, they could look at themselves and each other with unwavering honesty. The new year dawned not with fireworks, but with subpoenas. Charles Hamilton III, once the towering patriarch of one of America's most respected financial dynasties, now found himself at the center of a high-stakes congressional investigation. The televised hearings transfixed the nation. It was rare to see a man of his stature questioned so publicly, his carefully constructed empire stripped bare under the scrutiny of lawmakers and regulators. In the Hamilton penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the hearings unfold from their living room couch, their hands intertwined baby supplies, neatly stacked in the corner in preparation for the weeks ahead. Charles sat stiffly before the committee, his signature silk tie knotted with precision, but the calm confidence that once defined him had thinned into tension. Page after page of financial records and email transcripts were laid before him. Bribes, backdoor partnerships, misappropriated funds. With each revelation, the weight of decades of unchecked power bore down on him. For Nick, it was surreal. The man being interrogated was the same father who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to deliver a firm handshake, how to carry the Hamilton name with pride. But that pride had long since been eroded by secrets and manipulation. Eliza sensed his pain and rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not responsible for his choices," she said gently. "You made your own. That's what makes you different." Later that night, Nick's phone buzzed. "Father, the screen," read. He hesitated, then answered. Charles's voice was subdued, laced with weariness. "You've destroyed everything I built," he said, more exhausted than angry. "No," Nick replied quietly. "You destroyed it the moment you decided your legacy mattered more than your integrity." A long silence followed. Then Charles whispered, "Take care of that child. Be better than I was." The line disconnected. Nick stared at the screen, his reflection barely visible in the darkened glass. Eliza moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. And in that quiet moment, the final thread between father and son fell away, not with rage, but with resignation. The old world was gone, and a new one, however uncertain, had begun. Winter still clung to the city, its snow-crusted sidewalks and steel-grey skies, a stark backdrop for what would become the most transformative day of Eliza and Nick's lives. It began quietly just after dawn. Eliza stirred in bed, a dull cramp spreading through her lower back. At first she thought it was nothing, just another ache in the long stretch of late pregnancy. But minutes later the discomfort returned, sharper this time, and closer together. Her breath caught. She placed a hand on her belly, now round and firm. "Not yet," she whispered. "It's too early." Nick, who had been dozing in a nearby armchair after a late-night phone call with a legal team, jolted awake when she called his name. "The baby's coming," she said, voice shaking but steady. Within minutes they were racing through Manhattan in a black SUV, sirens in the distance and headlights slicing through the misty morning. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath. For Nick, every red light felt like an eternity. For Eliza, time blurred as pain and anticipation mingled in waves. They arrived at the hospital just after sunrise. The nurses acted quickly, guiding Eliza through intake as Nick clutched her hand, whispering encouragement between clenched jaws. Labor was swift, too swift. The baby was coming a month early, and there was no time to prepare mentally or emotionally. It was raw and real. Eliza pushed through the fear, her thoughts fixed on the tiny life inside her. And then he arrived. Their son. Small, pink, wailing with strength that belied his early arrival. Nick's hands trembled as he cut the cord. Eliza sobbed quietly, not from pain, but from relief, from joy, from sheer disbelief that after everything, the scandal, the fear, the collapse of everything familiar, they had this. "He's perfect," Nick whispered, holding the baby to his chest. They named him Oliver, a symbol of peace, of hope, of a future rebuilt. In that moment, the cameras, the headlines, the weight of legacy, it all vanished. There was only this tiny child and two people who had fought like hell to give him a better world. And in that sterile hospital room, love reigned quietly, but completely. The months after the exposé were a blur of transition. What once defined Nick and Eliza's lives, boardrooms, fundraisers, headlines now felt like relics of a world they had left behind. The Hamilton name no longer graced the covers of financial magazines as a symbol of power, but it was still present, whispered now in conversations about justice, courage, and corporate accountability. Charles Hamilton III, once untouchable, stepped down from the board of Hamilton Global Holdings. The company entered a grueling period of restructuring overseen by federal investigators and new leadership appointed by court mandate. Several of Charles's closest associates faced indictments, and although he avoided prison time by cooperating and paying substantial fines, his reputation was shattered. Nick, newly divorced from the Hamilton empire, chose not to fight for his stake in the company. "Let them rebuild it without me," he told Eliza. "I want our future built on something real." And so they redirected their energy into something entirely new. With Eliza's background in non-profit legal work and Nick's connections and insight into business, the couple launched an organization focused on ethical entrepreneurship. They called it Clear Path, a foundation committed to promoting transparency, integrity, and accountability in business. Rather than chasing profit, their mission was to elevate the stories of whistleblowers, reform corporate culture, and empower future leaders to do better. Eliza also revived her long-held dream of investigative journalism. Through a podcast titled Inside the Veil, she interviewed corporate insiders, lawyers, and activists about corruption and reform. Her calm, empathetic interviewing style, paired with Nick's honest reflections, quickly built a dedicated audience. Though the Hamilton name no longer held its elite shine, it found something more valuable. Respect from communities that valued truth over titles. Nick and Eliza embraced a quieter life, selling off the opulent trappings of their past. The penthouse felt warmer now, not as a monument to wealth, but as a home where love, laughter, and the cries of baby Oliver echoed off the marble walls. They had weathered the storm, and now, beneath calmer skies, they were building something greater than legacy, something rooted in honesty, compassion, and each other. The first day of spring bathed Manhattan in golden light. After a long, relentless winter, both literal and emotional, Eliza finally felt the warmth return. On their balcony, overlooking the soft green of Central Park, Nick sat cradling their baby son Oliver against his chest. The boy slept peacefully, his tiny breaths syncing with the rhythm of his father's heartbeat. Eliza stepped outside quietly, her bare feet padding across the cool stone. She paused to take in the view. Her husband no longer the glossy heir to a billion-dollar empire, but something much more real, grounded human. She sat beside him, the city stretching before them like a promise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Blowing it all up. The company. The name." Nick didn't answer right away. He looked down at Oliver, then out toward the skyline he used to own. "I regret the way it happened," he said finally. "The pain it caused. The silence between us when I should have talked to you. But I don't regret doing the right thing. I needed to choose our future over my father's legacy." Eliza nodded, emotion swelling in her throat. "You chose truth over power," she whispered. "And somehow, through all of it, we still found each other." Nick turned to her, his eyes glinting in the morning light. "You gave me a reason to be brave," he said. "You and him." Oliver stirred, letting out a soft sigh. Eliza smiled and leaned into Nick's shoulder, wrapping an arm around both of them. Together they sat in a silence filled with meaning, the kind of silence that comes only after weathering a storm. They had lost nearly everything society once said mattered. But here in the heart of the city, with a baby in their arms and sunlight on their faces, they knew they had gained something far more enduring, an unbreakable bond. And that was everything. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey through betrayal, scandal, and redemption. Nicholas Hamilton's decision to walk away on Christmas Eve set off a chain reaction that not only tore down a corrupted dynasty, but also brought an unwavering love into sharper focus. In the end, courage and truth won out, proof that even in a world where wealth and power often overshadow morality, integrity can light the way. If you found this story compelling and want to be part of our growing community, please like this video, share it with friends who love a good drama, and subscribe for more tales that explore the resilience of the human spirit. Your support keeps the conversation alive and helps us bring you even more thought-provoking stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of real-life drama.